Joining me now is Eva Lardizabal. She's Assistant Director of the Atlantic Council's Adrienne Arsht Latin America Center here in Washington. Thank you so much for joining our program.
Thank you, Francis.
Well, let's start with what sparked the state of emergency in the first place, this issue of gang violence in El Salvador. To put this in perspective, just how bad has it been prior to the state of emergency being implemented?
Yes, thank you, Francis, again for having me today. So what we're seeing in El Salvador is the product of a decades-long systemic issue of gang violence, a problem which Nayib Bukele inherited when he came into power in 2019. Back then, the year before he got elected in 2018, homicide rates were at 52 per 100,000 inhabitants, the highest in the world and the highest in the nation's history. So naturally, when Bukele came into power, he promised to do anything he could to reduce that high crime rate. And now in 2022, last year, the crime rate was at 7.8 per 100,000 per people.
So as we saw in Alistair's piece, many are praising the state of emergency for helping bring down this violence in El Salvador. So would you agree that it's been overall pretty effective?
In terms of security, it has been effective, yes. I've been talking to people both that live in El Salvador and have recently visited, and they do notice a difference in their day-to-day. Many of them have been able to walk in streets and in neighborhoods and areas that previously, a year ago, 5 years ago, they would have never imagined to be there if they didn't have to be. So they are noticing this difference. However, we do have to note that this is a Band-Aid solution. There are no long-term measures in place to actually tackle the root causes of the gang violence to begin with. And what are these issues? Inequalities, marginalization, and low investment in social policies to increase education among these marginalized communities, which are the breeding grounds of the gangs to begin with.
And another big issue, of course, is criticism over alleged human rights violations. Do you think the government has gone too far, in your opinion, given these concerns?
So, in my opinion, a state of emergency can be implemented for a number of different reasons. And either way, it can be abused. We have seen instances of arbitrary arrests, deaths in prison, and these arbitrary arrests are done in a way that they're profiling a lot of people. Over 6,000 people have been arrested, but not all are tied to gangs. Many of them are accused because they simply have tattoos on their bodies. And again, another point with state of emergency is constitutional rights and freedoms are suspended temporarily. So a lot of people, can be walking down the street and can be arrested arbitrarily for whatever reason. So it has been abused to a certain extent, and there is no indications that it'll slow down in the near future.
So what role does the international community have, and what have they done so far, if anything, to try to address these human rights allegations?
So many international human rights organizations, such as Human Rights Watch, have called out these human rights violations and have gotten a lot of reports from people on the ground reporting instances of people being beaten in these prisons and deaths in the prisons. So they're calling these out. However, Bukele, it fuels his profile and his propaganda for reducing the gang violence. So it fuels him, and he's using this as a way to propel his 2024 campaign in February 2024.
Quick question as we wrap up, Eva, how long do you think the state of emergency will last in El Salvador?
As I said earlier, there is no indication of it slowing down, and Bukele has already said that he wants to be reelected in 2024, which would put him at, another 5 years in power, and that means another 5 years of possibly arresting more people on the ground. And yeah, a lot of people are super happy because of this policy. His approval ratings are oscillating between 80 and 90%. And there is, no indication of it slowing down. So in the near future, I think we can expect him to use this state of emergency as a prize point for selling his campaign in 2024.
Eva Lardizabal, thank you so much for your expertise today and joining our program.
Thank you for having me.